Hey, what's up, guys? It's Shamrocked here with a quick video for you. This video is going to try and tackle the question of, which should you be playing, the Farseer tree or the Totemic tree when you start the War Within. So I'm gonna start by saying, the title for this video is a little bit clickbaity. I'm not actually going to answer, which tree is better than the other because there's not really a straight answer for that. It's really going to depend on the content you're doing, the level at which you're doing it at, and then most importantly, like your play style and what you actually enjoy to do with Resto Shaman, because both of these trees have a very different play style. However, they both stay very inherent to the what Resto Shaman has been over the last several years, which is really nice. I think Blizzard did a great job in keeping the flavor and the rhythm of what people enjoy about Resto Shaman. And keep in mind, that's coming from someone who's played Resto Shaman forever. So I'm very happy about the fact that they were able to sort of keep in tune with all of that stuff. So before we can answer this question, let's just back up a little bit and sort of explore what each of these trees are. So first you have the Farseer tree. So Farseer is all about harnessing your spiritual magic, right? So you're able to summon ancestors. That's kind of like the bread and butter of the spec. And these ancestors are going to, without getting into too much detail about it, they're going to basically copy what you do, right? So the way that they're programmed is every time you cast a single target heal, they are also going to cast a single target heal, specifically Healing Surge, but at a lessened spell power, right? So they're doing it with a little bit less power. Every time you cast an AoE heal, they're going to cast Chain Heal. However, it's less powerful and it only hits 3 people, I believe. And then same thing for DPS. Every time you cast a single target DPS spell, they're going to cast a Lava Burst. And every time you cast an AoE DPS spell, they are going to cast Chain Lightning. So that's kind of just like putting specifics to it. But really, if you want to just look at the math of it and you want to like strip all of that away, basically they're just adding power to the stuff that you're already casting, right? And what's interesting about that is it kind of means that you're not necessarily playing fully around Farseer. It's kind of the other way around. Like Farseer is there to play around you. It's going to augment what you're already doing. That being said, the method in which you summon the ancestors, there's two main methods, right? So you have your first one, which is either by casting Undulation or by casting Unleash Life. So Unleash Life is a spell on demand. It's something you can hit. I believe the cooldown is 15 seconds. So and the ancestor that summons is going to last for a longer time. Undulation, however, is a talent that we use that buffs every third Healing Surge or Healing Wave. So basically, it's different in the sense that it's going to summon an ancestor every third Healing Wave or third Healing Surge that you cast. Because of that, it's technically, if you just spam Healing Wave and Healing Surge, specifically Healing Surge because it's faster, you're able to get more ancestors out than what you're stuck to with the Unleash Life cooldown. So that's the main reason why the ancestor with Undulation lasts a little bit shorter time than the one summoned by Unleash Life. The second way to summon an ancestor is by using the Capstone talent, which is Ancestral Swiftness. This is basically just a replacement for the Nature Swiftness spell. It reduces the cooldown, it actually increases the damage and healing of the spell you use it on, and it summons an ancestor. I believe it's 6 seconds, and then if you take the talent that like increases the time at which so if you take the talent that increases how long ancestors last, you're going to get 10 seconds from your Ancestral Swiftness, and you're going to get 16 seconds from your Unleash Life, or 10 seconds from Undulation. So all of that is just a really long way of saying the playstyle that you do is really only going to change in the sense that you're going to want to be summoning ancestors pretty much as possible. I think for a Mythic Plus environment, you're going to be, well, actually, no, sorry. For both Raid and Mythic Plus, the goal is going to be to balance between having out as many ancestors as you possibly can throughout an entire encounter or throughout, an entire dungeon, but also making sure that you're summoning these ancestors when they're actually needed, during big damage windows where you're going to need the extra healing. So once you wrap your head around that, the gist of Farseer is that the ancestors that you summon are going to be augmenting the spells that you're using, right? So once you have your ancestors on board, they're with you, they're beside you, they're casting their spells, your rotation is going to be what you've already been doing. So if you're a Primordial Wave player, that's not going to change. If you're a Chain Heal player, that's not going to change. all it's going to do is make you more powerful. That being said, because you do have certain windows, and there is going to be a certain sequence, obviously, that you can cast, which I will try to cover if I do end up making a Farseer guide, which I'm going to try to do. I don't want to make any promises because there are other shamans out there who are playing Farseer more than I am, and they might have a better guide. But I'll try to make one with what I've played. But basically, yeah, there is going to be a general sequence to what you want to cast, and there is going to be certain globals that you're going to need to fit into your window in order to make Farseer really effective for what you want to do. But taking like a macroscopic look at it, it's not really going to change the way that you've been playing for the last few years if you're someone who is stuck with Resto Shaman. If you're someone who's brand new to the spec, this is kind of a cool opportunity for you because you're coming in at a time where there are two very different playstyles. In the past, we've had playstyles that have been kind of separated between chain heal build and no chain heal build, and they've been different enough that they do require a different. They each require sort of a different mindset and a different way of playing, but the core concepts of the spec have always been there. Like that part hasn't changed. So I think coming in at a time where you have Farseer and Totemic, you'll see with Totemic the playstyle is at least in my opinion extremely different. It's much more positioning based, and you also just have windows every 20 to 30 seconds where you have to cast a very specific sequence of spells in order to get the most out of what you want to do. Which is interesting. I guess it's kind of the same for both your trees in the sense that you are trying to, in order to maximize your healing windows with each, there's probably a specific sequence of spells that you want to cast. And that sequence might vary slightly depending on the actual situation that you're in, depending on what incoming damage is coming in and what your main goal is, right? Are you trying to fill a Cloudburst Totem? Are you trying to do immediate reactive healing? Are you trying to do proactive healing where you're setting up for a later damage window, right? Like all of that is going to dictate what you're doing through your healing windows or how you're setting up for them. But yeah, that being said, they do feel like very distinct and very different play styles. So just to summarize, for Farseer at least, I think Farseer is, you're going to be very partial to Farseer. I think it's going to be something that you enjoy if you already enjoy and have enjoyed the way that Shaman has worked over the last few years. Because really all it does is it accentuates that, it augments it. Totemic, on the other hand, like I said, it's very different. It's very position based. The instant healing rain is nice, and being able to move the rain is also extremely nice. But it does create a new gameplay style that I don't think Shaman has really ever seen before. Like I said, it's very positioning based, and you're kind of using your elemental motes that your Surging Totem summons as like ammunition for different combinations of spells that you can do. And then if you're using the Earth Surge talent, it's going to make it so that your Earth Living weapon is going to increase healing on people, which just adds more complexity to the rotation that you're going to want to do based on how the motes work. So Totemic, I feel like in order to like explain how to do it, it's a little bit more complicated just because of how different it is. So if you are interested in really getting an in-depth view on how Totemic works, I've already released a Totemic guide. So I do advise that you go and check that out if you're like, once again, really curious on how it works or want to try it out. Because I have learned some cool tips and tricks playing it in Mythic Plus that I've outlined in that video that you might find useful. But yeah, so you have your Farseer tree and you have your Totemic tree. Now let's get into like what you guys probably really wanted to hear from this video, which is more powerful. All right, and I think in order to answer that question, you sort of have to look at the different tiers of gaming. All right, so to back up and start, Totemic is very beginner friendly in the sense that if you're running Healing Stream Totem and you're running low end content where the healing requirement is not that high, then Totemic offers a very passive way of healing, right? Like you can go into a low Mythic Plus dungeon, or even if you're doing raiding, like I would say even up to like AOTC raiding, and in Mythic Plus, even up to like the point where you're getting your portals and stuff. The passive build for Totemic is going to do you justice. And it's nice for anybody who just wants to log in and, hang out with their friends and, not really think too much about the rotation and really just play the game and experience the story and experience, the fun that you can have raiding with friends or doing dungeons with friends. Totemic is going to be very nice for you in that regard because it can do a lot of the healing for you so you can focus on other things, like, to be completely frank, whether that's DPS or whether that's like, not paying attention to the game and doing other things while the game is sort of playing in the background. Totemic is very beginner friendly in that sense as well. It's also very beginner friendly because as I was saying before, the rotation for Farseer is going to lend itself to people who have already been playing Shaman forever, because it really does rely on you getting the most out of your build, or sorry, out of your rotation and out of the abilities you're using. Not to say that Totemic is not also like that, but because Totemic is so new, and like the combination of abilities you want to press are not necessarily something you would have done in the past, it might be easier to learn because it's like a fresh start, and it's pretty easy to pick up on. So with that in mind, Farseer is not necessarily difficult to pick up on. It's just more difficult to get the rhythm on. Like if you were to play both specs for a limited amount of time, you'd probably be better with Totemic, and possibly enjoy it more too, just because it feels like, and once again, this is just speaking from personal experience, it feels like Farseer is the tree that requires a little bit more practice to do properly. But I'm saying that with the caveat that if you have been playing Shaman for the last, 1 year, 2 year, 3 years, even the last 6 months, that is your practice right there, right? Because if you already have that foundation of how to play Resto Shaman from the last, from any time in Dragonflight, like I said, Farseer is just going to augment that. All you need to really do is learn how to plug in those ancestor summoning abilities into your rotation and just really learn how to optimize that. Whereas Totemic is much different. Sorry, to back up and recap, Totemic is going to be very easy for beginners and very easy for like low to mid level content. Farseer is going to be a little bit more difficult for beginners, but once you learn how the Shaman healing works, it's gonna come very quickly. Like the way to realize how to optimize Farseer is going to become very clear once you realize how Shaman works. So with that being said, although Farseer is not necessarily more beginner friendly than Totemic, it's going to be just as viable to heal that entry level content. It's just going to require a little bit more active healing on your end. And what I mean by that is it's going to require your attention. Like you can't just hit a button and then all the passive healing is going to be done for you. Farseer is very much a proactive spec. You want to be able to plan for your damage windows. You want to set yourself up for nice cooldowns. And that's kind of how this spec plays like all the time. There's not a lot of variation with that. The main variation for Farseer between the different talents you can pick for your hero spec is basically high roll gambling play. And what I mean by that is you have chances to summon more and more ancestors, and if you high roll you can have a ton of them, but if you low roll you can not have a lot, and that is going to sort of dictate how much healing you can do in a window. So it's kind of like a risky way of playing, because and it's not necessarily great for higher end content, because a lot of the times for higher end content for both Raid and Mythic Plus, you need to have a very specific plan for how to do things, right? And how to get past damage windows. You need to know timings. You need to know what you're going to press and when you're going to press it. So if you're playing a spec that is more luck based, it's very hard to do that, because you could either high roll and get everything you need, or you can low roll and then your group dies, and what's the point? So there's that aspect of Farseer. The other choice nodes for a lot of the Farseer stuff is just having ancestors that last longer, but that you can depend on being there, right? So that spec is, or that play style, that talent choice is probably going to be better for people who are pushing higher end content, because you are able to depend. You know exactly what you're going to be able to do in every window. You're not hoping for a high proc and not hoping for a low proc, right? So those are kind of the two playstyles for Farseer. It's not like it's passive and active. It's more just like, do you want to gamble a little bit, or do you want to have assurance in what you're going to be able to do? Totemic, on the other hand, the two different playstyles for Totemic are one which is very passive in the sense that your totems are going to be doing a lot of your healing for you via healing stream totem, via the lively totems, which, sends out chain heals, via just the increased healing that the surging totem healing rain does in general, which is once again very passive. But the other playstyle for Totemic is actually very active, and that would be using Cloudburst Totem, using your Earth Surge windows, and really capitalizing on the moats that the Capstone talent for Totemic offers. Which, like I said, if you're doing lower content or you're a beginner, you can completely ignore that part of it. You don't have to capitalize on your moats. You don't have to do Cloudburst and memorize Cloudburst timings and damage patterns. You can just do, right? You can let the spec do what you want it to do, and then you can play however much you want. So with all of that being said, lower end content, you're going to find Totemic easier. I think once you move up to higher end content, let's say mid to high, you're probably going to find Farseer a little bit easier for two reasons. One is, like I said, it very much lends itself to how you've already been playing. So if you're an experienced Resto Shaman, you're already going to be good at Farseer because you just do more of what you've already been doing. Second is that Farseer is very good for mana. So for anybody who, once again, maybe doesn't really know what they're doing and is trying to push higher end content, it's very easy to fall into the trap with the Totemic tree of just spamming spells that you really shouldn't be spamming. And if you're not capitalizing on your moat windows and your Earth Surge windows, and you're maybe not very good with Cloudburst, you're going to have trouble keeping up with the damage output on the very high end level. So we're talking title keys, mythic raids where you know exactly what's happening and you're really trying to capitalize on every moment. I feel like the ceiling for Totemic in those situations might be a little bit higher. I don't know if the output for either one is going to be higher. I also think it's too early to say for that kind of stuff because there's going to be so much tuning in terms of the fights and the class trees and different abilities, innate abilities that aren't even tied to the class trees, but that, affect it. I think it's too early to say definitively which one is going to be more powerful. Right now, based on testing from other raiders, it looks like in raid, at least Totemic is going to be more powerful in the sense that it's going to do more HPS and more healing in general. But in Mythic Plus, I think where things are not as black and white, and where your performance is based over a whole 30 minutes of play where you're using every single piece of your toolkit that's available. I think that HPS difference, in the sense that Totemic might be able to do just more flat healing in a raid, I think that becomes less important because Mythic Plus is not necessarily about how much HPS you can push out. Usually, sometimes it is, but for the most part, it's not. They're just very specific fights like Kajin in Dragonflight where that actually is the case, but it's very far and few in between. Mythic Plus is more about being able to utilize your entire toolkit in order to time a key, and work with your team in order to do that. So with that being said, I think, once again, moving into higher end content, Farseer might be the better pick because it's more mana friendly and it's a little bit... it's less position based, meaning that you don't have to constantly worry about where people are standing. And it's also just going to, like I said, it really works with the kit that you already have. Farseer has a lot of really cool tools. It works with, it gives you extra tidal waves charges, which works directly with the current tier set for season 1. It works very nicely with your standard kit. That being said, Totemic has another strength in the sense that it does work a little bit better with your cooldowns, in the sense it reacts better with your cooldowns more than Farseer does. Farseer is not really going to enhance any of your major cooldowns at all, really, whereas Totemic does. So there is that aspect of it. But yeah, I think, I kind of digress here. I think if you're looking for which one you want to use, I think you need to try out both talent trees. From a pure HBS perspective, if you want the easier to learn, lots of healing, don't have to think about it that much, start with Totemic because that is going to give you that. However, if you want something that's a little bit more complex, however, that really leans on your own playstyle, I think you would probably enjoy starting with Farseer. Now, if you're someone who's really your end goal is to push high-end content, you really want to be able to learn both of these trees because I can tell you from my experience with these Mythic Plus dungeons, there are some dungeons that really lend themselves to Farseer. For instance, Arakara is one of the new dungeons that has a lot of movement throughout the boss fights and a lot of times where people are just really spread out. And Totemic is just not great for that, right? So that's a dungeon where you're probably going to want to do Farseer. Same with like a dungeon like the Dawnbreaker, where there's a lot of single target healing that's just going to eat through your mana. That's another one where you may want to go Farseer as long as you can keep up with the AoE damage that the bosses are doing, which you should be able to. However, then you have dungeons like City of Threads where everything is very close and claustrophobic, and the damage windows line up perfectly. Like literally the last boss in City of Threads, which is a somewhat difficult boss, Totemic just makes it so easy because the cooldown, like the cooldown windows, your healing burst windows with Surging Totem just lines up so perfectly with it. So I think, like, once again, if you're looking to really push high-end content for Mythic Plus, you're going to want to learn how to use both of these trees. But looking at an end goal, I think, once again, this is just from experience, but I think Farseer, if you're really good at Farseer, it's going to be easier to use because it's going to be better on your mana, and it has more, you have more freedom with what you can do. You're not constrained like you are with Totemic to, like I said, the positioning, the small window of where you can cast things that are actually powerful, right? Farseer seems like it's much more like even, right? Totemic, I feel like Totemic healing is very like, it's like up and down, up, down. Like you have very, very high burst windows, but then you're kind of dead in the water for a little bit. Whereas Farseer, it's a little bit more even. You always have an ancestor out if you're using the longevity build. You always have a little bit of augmenting to you. You always have very good mana usage. You always have stacks of tidal waves. If you're running 3 Riptides and 3 Lava Bursts, you always have Riptides out. Like it's just, I feel like it's just a little bit more forgiving when you get to that high-end content. It's very easy with Totemic, in my experience, to fall behind, and then all of a sudden you're scrambling and you don't have mana, and you know you can't do what you need to do. So once again, that's just my take on it. It's funny. Everything that I'm describing could completely change in a month. They may do completely overhaul, like they may do complete overhauls for all of this. But I'm really hoping they don't, though, because I think they've really hit a sweet spot with Totemic and Farseer, where they are both, in some regards, equal in power. Where I think, Totemic in the hands of most people will edge a little bit ahead in terms of like the output it can do healing wise, but I think in the hands of skilled players, especially once people really learn the raids and the boss timings and all of the damage outputs, I think they're going to be very even in terms of output. And I think towards the end of the tier, where once again, assuming nothing changes, I think you're going to see people who are really good with Totemic possibly pulling ahead, but most people who are just average at Totemic will be in the middle, while people who are decent with Farseer will pull ahead of them. But speculation. I really don't know what the end answer is going to be. So just to summarize, if you came here looking about an answer for what to play, if you're new to the spec and you just want something that's easy, play Totemic. If you're an experienced player and you really want to try something that's maybe a little bit more difficult and that's going to lean on the playstyle you've been learning for the last, however long you've been playing Resto Shaman, go with Farseer. However, I encourage you to try out both because you may enjoy one more than the other. For instance, Totemic, I really enjoy because it's so different to what we've been doing. And I also like Totemic because it feels very punishing at times, in the sense that if you mess up your window or you mistime your window, like I said, you're kind of dead in the water. Like there's not a whole lot you can do. Whereas Farseer, I feel like, is a little bit more forgiving in the sense that if you screw up the Farseer aspect of your tree, you can still heal in the same way that you've been healing for forever, right? Especially like assuming you've been playing Resto Shaman before. So yeah, I hope this video was useful for you. I hope I didn't just confuse you more or make you even more apprehensive about taking one over the other. Really, my advice would be to try both trees and choose the one that you enjoy that also allows you to complete the content that you want to complete. And then you know what? In a month or two after the expansion's been launched and so many more people have been playing, we've seen the dungeon tuning and the raid tuning and everything is sort of at a spot where it's going to be. That's probably when you'll have a more definitive answer from the community on which spec you should be playing for which content. And that might even get as specific as which hero tree should you be using for each individual raid boss or each individual Mythic Plus dungeon. I really see that that's the end point of where we're going to be at, is people who are good at Resto Shaman are going to be able to swap between these two specs and play what they need to play in order to output the best, whether it's HPS, DPS, utility, whatever, for the content that they need to. So yeah, with all of that ranting, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.